Well, welcome this day to How to Illuminate the Bible with Accordance, and our speaker today is Dr. Roy Brown. And before we get going, and I have a question for Dr. Brown, but before we get going, I want to make mention of a few things in the GoToWebinar control panel. The first and primary, most important thing is you have different things. You have your audio, your webcam questions. There's a place called questions. If you open that up, and during the workshop, if you have a question, go ahead and type it in. We have people standing by that will try to answer those questions as we go. But if they cannot answer it, and if it's a question directly for Dr. Brown, we will give those questions to him at the very end of the workshop, time permitting. So also, if you go down a little further, there's a handout, How to Illuminate the Bible with Accordance. This is very important. You need to click on that and download that now. You cannot get access to it after the workshop is over. Well, you could if you wrote an email to Linda, but we really encourage you to download that handout now by going to the handouts and clicking on it. Also, later, you're going to, under the chat, we have only for people that attend the workshops, we have a 25% coupon code that gives you 25% off any products we have in our Accordance store, except for the things on sale. We also have a 50% off our specialty starters, which makes a great gift for people for a product under $50 with a wealth of Accordance modules in that. So be aware of that. So those are the two things that only you have access to, 25% coupon code and those specialty starters. One last thing, the things that Dr. Brown is going to be talking about, if you go to accordancebible.com and see our current sale, most everything that he's going to be talking about, we have on sale at greater than that 25% savings. So you'll want to, if you see something here of interest, just know that we have it on sale more than likely. So with that, I'm going to get back to Dr. Brown. Dr. Brown, question for you.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you have traveled, I think, extensively, pretty much, through the Middle East. How many photos and pictures, museums and places do you have personally that you can account for?
Well, I don't know the exact number, but it's well over 150,000, maybe even 200,000.
And how long have you been taking photos and pictures of museums and places?
Well, actually, only seriously in the last 10 years. I mean, I've taken pictures longer ago than that, but in the last 10 years is when I've been taking pictures more seriously with the purpose of putting them in the products that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. So anyway, they're just lovely pictures. They're wonderful. They really do help to illuminate the Bible. And Dr. Brown, many of you already know who he is, but he was the initial programmer and developer of Accordance and Oak Tree software. And so we owe a great indebtedness to him for his work and labor that brings all of this stuff to light and life for us as we study the scriptures. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Brown to teach us today on how to illuminate the Bible with Accordance.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead temporarily and turn the video off here and go ahead and play the presentation here that I believe you can see on your screens now. What we're going to talk about today is how to illuminate the Bible with Accordance. And in particular, we're going to talk about, first of all, what do we mean by illuminating the Bible, at least the way we're using it today. I'm going to focus on many of the visual resources in Accordance that can illuminate the Bible. But in particular, I'm going to spend most of the time on the product we call the Photo Museum. And you'll see that as we develop it here, which really is one of the key products that really illuminates the Bible in so many different ways. And we will spend a little bit of time after that with a similar product, the use of Picture the New Testament to illuminate the New Testament. So let's go ahead and get started now with what do we mean by illuminating the Bible. Okay, first of all, it can mean a lot of different things to different people. One understanding of illumination is just simply read the Bible more carefully. If you just study it more carefully and read it several times, many times that alone will help you in illumination better understand what is in the Bible. There's even a technical understanding of illumination. If there's theologians here, this is a branch of theology called pneumatology, which talks about illumination by the Holy Spirit. And this is more of a theological sense of understanding illumination. But the way we want to talk about illumination in this particular presentation is to show how pictures of physical objects can illuminate the Bible, to bring you back into the time so that you're seeing the same things that the people who were at the time of the Bible would have been familiar with. And seeing these physical objects, hopefully, at least, will make the Bible come alive by showing the background, setting, and context of the Bible. It's no longer just simply a dry, maybe to some people, book on theology, but rather it will show that there's life. Many people, what I was going to say is cultures, of course, change, their languages have changed, geographic settings have changed, but people are still pretty much basically the same today as they were during the time of the Bible. But we have the disadvantage that we don't know the setting, background, context, language, geography, and all of that of the Bible. So that's the idea behind illumination and the way we're using it here today. Also, seeing these objects can be useful for filling in details not included in the Bible. One detail that people don't think about is what was the daily life of people in the Bible? Objects and archaeology tell us about that, but many times in the Bible, they don't focus that much on the daily life because that wasn't the most important message of the Bible. But by knowing the daily life, it helps give us a background that we may not realize as we read the Bible. Now, let me just caution, though, that these objects that I'm showing, we're not doing this to prove the Bible. I don't want to get into that. That gets into the area of apologetics and so on. But I will add that these objects do enhance the credibility of the Bible. When you see things in objects that fit with what you read in the Bible, that certainly enhances its credibility, although you might say it's not proven the Bible in the absolute mathematical sense, but certainly these enhance the credibility of, yes, we see these objects and here's the object that's talked about and mentioned in the Bible. So let's look now at some of the accordance visual resources that can illuminate the Bible. And I'm just going to go through here a list of them and just show you a few illustrations. The purpose of this is not to sell you on anything. It's your choice whether you want to purchase them, but this will give you the idea of the scope of the things. And many of these resources are genuinely unique. I don't know if that's good English or not. It's either unique or it's not unique. But anyway, some of these you can't really find anywhere else. First, we're going to focus on is the Accordance Bible Lens Photo Guide. This visual guide focuses on sites from the Bible primarily. And what we have is a low-cost version of the Accordance Photo Guide, which is called the Photo Guide Overview, that provides a low-cost overview of most Bible sites, but there are a limited number of pictures in this overview. But because the photo guide has gotten so big with literally thousands of pictures now, we've actually expanded it so much that it's now divided into 5 major regions. And I'll show now examples of the photo guide in the 5 regions that we have for the Bible. The big one is Israel itself. And we're talking about the general land of Israel, not necessarily political Israel. First of all, here's something from the Old Testament. This is in the excavations of the city of David in Jerusalem, and they found a house here where this platform is called Achiel's house because they found a bulla or a clay stamp with that name on it, so they figured that was the name of the guy. And this is actually in the city of David, which is in the Bible called Jerusalem, not the current city with the walls that you see today as tourists, but this is the actual city of David, and it sometimes is used synonymously for the word Zion. In the New Testament, we have another interesting site at Caesarea, and here you see it's along the ocean on the coast, And there we see one of many palaces of Herod. Herod had several palaces. This is the same King Herod that killed the babies in Bethlehem that you might read about at Christmas time in the Christmas story. And this shows the upper palace of Herod in Caesarea. And this room here, where we only see the floor remaining, may well be the place where the Apostle Paul stood before the governors that were living at that time after Herod had died, Governor Felix and Festus. And this may well be the hall where he met them in, where he met the kings, because he was kept under house arrest in this palace. Okay, now the next photo guide is the Near East. This covers all the other countries. Primarily Jordan is the one that has the most, because Jordan is another forgotten part of the Holy Land. Many people think of just Israel, but Jordan also has many relevant sites, or sites relevant to the Bible, and I'll just show you a couple of examples. Here is Mount Nebo, which is in Jordan, and you can see here the Jordan Valley, and in the far distance is and in the valley would be the Jordan River, and the far distance is Israel, and you see a little signpost pointing out the different sites where they would be located at. And this was Mount Nebo, where Moses was when he died and could not cross over into the Promised Land. The other very fascinating place in Jordan is the very earliest map ever made of the Middle East in detail. There's a few very crude maps by the Assyrians and Babylonians, but this is a detailed map. It's called a Medeba map from the 6th century AD and the floor of a church. And this is not all of the map. This is actually only the places surrounding Jerusalem. And this big walled city is Jerusalem here. You could see the Cardo Street, Damascus Street gate is on the left. Church of the Holy Sepulchre is in the middle. The Nia Church, which you probably haven't heard of, is over here on the right. And here you see the names all written in Greek. There it says Hagia Polis Jerusalem, you know, this holy city of Jerusalem here. And this is a very fascinating map because it not only shows the places, but even gives them labels in Greek for the places. Now let's go to Europe. And the Bible is also involved in Europe, especially in other parts of the Roman Empire. For example, here's Mars Hill in Athens, Greek, where Paul gave his famous message when he was in Athens on Mars Hill. And then here is in Italy and Rome, underneath the city of Rome in the catacombs. This is a very early piece of Christian art, probably from the 2nd or 3rd century, showing Jesus and the apostles at the top here. And this is from the St. Domenico catacombs in Rome, Italy. And now we go to Turkey. Turkey has got so much. There are just lots of museums. There's at least 250 archaeological sites just in Turkey alone. So we had to give Turkey its own photo guide, and I'll just show a couple of examples there. Here is one more from the Old Testament. This is the Lion's Gate in Hattusha. And maybe you haven't heard of Hattusha, but Hattusha was the capital of the Hittite Empire, which is mentioned several times in the Bible. This is the Hittites that lived far north of Canaan and of Israel in the area we'd call Anatolia, or in modern day Turkey. And here's a New Testament site. This is the Acropolis of Pergamum. Pergamum is mentioned in the book of Revelation. There was a letter addressed to it, and it was a very big city, and you can see the whole city at the top. There's actually a lower part also. You see this very steep theater. It's one of the steepest theaters in the ancient world, built on the side of the hill, and you can see temple structures in the background there. And of course, this is just an overview shot. We have many more pictures of this. This is just an example in the photo guide for Turkey. And then finally, again, I can say the same thing for Egypt as I did for Turkey. Egypt is just loaded with stuff, and Egypt is mentioned many, many times in the Bible, the most famous being the children of Israel leaving Egypt. And we even can see influences of Egyptian culture in a lot of things, but I won't go into that right now. So let's just look at a couple of pictures. For example, to the south of Egypt, you have this very tremendous monument built by Pharaoh Ramesses II called Abu Simbel. And if you look at the people here, you see how huge this mountain and these statues are of Ramesses II. And then in the New Testament, Alexandria was a prominent city, mentioned several times in the New Testament. And here you see a few of the remains. Here's Pompey's pillar. General Pompey was involved in Egypt right before the time of the New Testament with the famous stories with Cleopatra and so on. And here's a sphinx-like creature, probably also from the same period. Okay, now what I've done is show the photo guide in detail here, but I want to also just list a few of the other resources just so that you're aware of them. They may or may not be of interest, but at least you know that they exist on Accordance. This is another unique tool. This is called 3D reconstructions of the biblical world, and here's an example of it where they built this 3D reconstruction not only of the temple, but of the temple platform and the surrounding cities of Jerusalem. And this is the Temple Mount looking from the west to the east. Another tool that may not be aware of is called 100 Archaeological Sites in Israel. And this again is a resource loaded with photographs of archaeological sites where you have the history and background to the archaeological sites and photographs taken by an Israeli photographer, Hanan Issachar. And here's just an example of Tel Azekah overlooking the Valley of Elah. And he will talk here about the Valley of Elah in detail and give you more of the archaeological history. And this is 100 sites, not 100 pictures. There's at least 1,000 or more pictures in this particular resource. And then there's another resource that people don't think about is that when you go to Israel, there are many, many, many churches that were built, some of which go back to the 4th century in Israel. And here's an example of one you might not think of as a church, but this is a monastery of St. George right out in the wilderness of Judea. This is to the east of Jerusalem, along what's called the Wadi Kelt, the dry wadi, right here in the middle of the desert. And you have this monastery here built possibly to commemorate an event in the Bible or maybe a later church event, a church history event. We also have another resource that has over 4,000 pictures of what we call archival pictures, of pictures. How did this area look 100 years ago before modern civilization? And here's an example. This is the Virgin's Fountain, which today is called Mary's Well in Nazareth. You could see the city is very poor and not built up. You can see in the background, there's no houses on that hill. Well, today Nazareth is a much larger city, and here are the women coming to get water at the well there around 1915, over 100 years ago. So you could see some of these sites. You could see sites, some of which are not even around anymore. They've been either destroyed or covered over or built up and so on. Another very interesting visual resource is the Biblical World in Pictures. This is a resource provided by the Biblical Archaeology Society. These are the ones that do the Biblical Archaeology Review magazine, which we also, by the way, have on Accordance. And here's just a couple of examples. Now, these pictures are a little bit older, but they're very good in terms of archival value. Here, for example, is St. Catherine's Monastery near the traditional Mount Sinai. And even more interesting is here's an archival picture of the two Bedouins that are alleged to have found the first Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran in Cave 1. And you've probably heard the story of they were herding sheep and threw a rock in the cave and heard it hit a pottery jar, and that's how they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. Well, this is supposed to be the picture of the two Bedouins that did that. And then I finally have to mention one historical geography. We have many, many historical geography books, and a historical geography is a book that focuses on merging the history and geography by looking at the history in the context of the geography that the land was in. And I cannot recommend any book more than called The Sacred Bridge, published by Carta. Anson Rainey and Steve Notley were the authors. Anson Rainey has passed away recently, but both of them were Accordance users. This book is published by Carta, along with some other books from Carta, which are very, very good on the historical background of Israel. And this this is, in my opinion, by far the best historical geography book ever written of Israel, and I think it'll be around many, many decades. And here's an example of a page where he talks about Philistia and goes quite a bit of detail in Philistia, shows pictures. Here's a inscription from Ekron and a four-horned altar from Ekron. In other words, it's very good. It focuses on the history and geography of the entire Bible. Now, I'm just going to list here other visual resources. Probably you've already been overwhelmed by the numbers, but we also have another resource similar to the other one. It's a virtual tour of just the temple, not of Jerusalem. We have another one that's interesting, Views That Have Vanished, that we got from Todd Boland. We've licensed some of Todd Boland's resources here that are hard to get. This is views from right after the Six-Day War of places that have changed quite a bit, especially around Jerusalem. And then we have another historic view of the Holy Land from the 1870s, but these are primarily drawings of early explorers, not photographs so much. And then we have both cultural images of the Holy Land and trees, plants, and flowers of the Holy Land also here. And then last but absolutely not least is we have actually many more Bible atlases and historical geography resources. I just showed you the Sacred Bridge as just probably the most well-known and probably the best of them. So this is an overview of all the accordance visual resources. I would estimate, this is just an estimate, that there are at least 40,000 pictures that you can have access to from the resources in accordance. Now, I know Richard asked me how many pictures I have. Well, not all of them are on accordance, but many of the best ones are. And when you combine those with these other resources that I'd show, we have at least 40,000 pictures that you can use on accordance that illustrate and illuminate the Bible. Okay, now we want to move to what I want to focus on the most, and this is the Accordance Bible Times Photo Museum. And you'll understand in a minute why we say Bible Times, because this is connected or linked somewhat with the Accordance Timeline, which is another visual resource that shows the chronology of events and people in the Bible. So what kind of articles does the Photo Museum have? And that's what we want to focus on now, because this is really a unique resource. It's a little bit like a Bible dictionary on steroids, if I could use that expression, with many, many more pictures. But what it focuses on are objects that illuminate the Bible. It focuses on activities that illuminate the Bible, and focus on people groups from the Bible, such as articles on the Philistines, Hittites, Romans, Canaanites, Egyptians, and others, and what are the things that illustrate how these people, who these people were and how they lived. And finally, we have the background of individuals that come from the Accordance Timeline, especially rulers and prophets, especially the rulers, a little bit of the prophets, because the rulers are the ones that tended to be written in the history more than the prophets. So let's first look now at objects that illuminate the Bible. Okay, the first, I'm just going to give a few examples here. There's many, many more than this, but just a few examples. Let's look at the object that we call altars. What was an altar like in the time of the Bible? First of all, what is an altar? An altar is just simply an object that's used for offering sacrifices or burning incense or some sort of memorial of some kind to a deity. And notice I said deity and not to God, because there are also pagan altars. And the word altar is mentioned many times in the Bible, both in an Israelite context and in a pagan context. And I'll just give a couple examples here from the Bible. It says in Genesis 8:20 that Noah built an altar to the Lord and took these animals and burned sacrifices or offerings on the altar. Also in Judges, we give an example of a pagan altar. In Judges 2:2, it said, you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land, that is the Canaanites. And then it says, you shall break down their altars. So this is clearly referring to an altar from the Canaanites, not an altar to the Lord. So here's an example of a very, very fascinating altar. It's called the altar of Joshua. I put a question mark because there's some debate on it. It's right on top of Mount Ebal, and it's actually mentioned in Joshua 8:30. And I will say, though, that the archaeologists that have worked on this do date it back at least to the time of Judges, if not earlier. Now here's a somewhat later altar. This is a reconstructed altar from Beersheba, but the thing that's interesting is these 4 horns, because the Bible talks about the horns of the altar. And Leviticus 4:30 mentioned that specifically. This is now a little bit later. This dates from the period of the kings of Israel, not from the earlier, from the Exodus and so forth, time of Moses, but it still illustrates the idea of the horns of the altar. And here's another horned altar from Megiddo that I believe may have been a pagan horned altar, but the idea was the same here. And then finally, here's an example of a Philistine cult stand from Ashdod. So this is an example that shows a part of the Philistine worship in which they have musicians, you can see on the bottom, playing different instruments there. And this was found in Ashdod. And this tells us a little bit more about those enemies of Israel that we now know today as the Philistines. Now let's look at one more topic, and then we'll go to the other categories, is armor. Armor is any covering worn to protect the soldier in battle. And armor is mentioned many times in both the Old Testament and New Testament. For example, in 1 Samuel 17:38, Saul clothed David with his armor, and it even mentions the specific pieces of armor, helmet and coat of mail and so forth. David, by the way, as you know from the story, refused it afterwards and just came to Goliath with his sling. But here it actually mentions armor. And in Luke 11:22, even in a parable of Jesus, it talks about he overcomes him, he takes away his armor in which he trusted, and so on. And then finally, many of you might be familiar in the New Testament with the allegorical use of armor in Ephesians 6:11, where it says, put on the whole armor of God. And then it mentions different pieces of armor and what those are allegorically standing for. So let's look at armor now, pictures. Here's a picture of armor from Mycenae. Now, Mycenae is up in Greece, in the area of Greece. The Minoans and Mycenaeans were on the Greek islands and also on the eastern coast of Greece. But what's interesting about this piece of pottery is that it shows all of the armor of Goliath. It shows a spear. The sword is a little hard to see there. And it shows the armor, it shows the helmet, and it even shows the leg armor here. And if you read 1 Samuel 17:4-7, it gives exactly the same details of the armor of Goliath. And that's very reasonable because the Philistines, the Bible even says that they came from Kaftor, which is Crete, and the Philistines were invaders that came from the islands, or possibly partly mainland of Greece, also during the time of the Judges. So, of course, this would follow the same pattern. And then here's a much later example, one example of a soldier, of a Roman soldier with his armor, and we'll show that again, another example a little bit later on. Now, this is an actual helmet of an Assyrian soldier that they found in excavations. And this is a New Testament example of Roman leg armor we call greave or greaves for both legs. This is the leg armor from the New Testament, just like I pointed out the Old Testament one. And what's fascinating about this Assyrian soldier's helmet is if you look at this relief here of an Assyrian relief, you see this guy in the middle has exactly the same style of helmet. And this is a relief that illustrates Assyrian soldiers with armor, where you can see their shields and their helmets and other parts of the armor, and you see some of the weapons. I believe you see some spears and bows and so forth. So this illustrates what the Bible is talking about when it talks about armor. Now let's move on from objects to activities that illuminate the Bible. First activity is very basic. You wouldn't think about it much. Fishing is mentioned in the Bible. And it's actually, the Bible talks about many different means or ways to catch fish. And even though fishing is more well known in the Bible than the New Testament, because a lot of Jesus's disciples they were fishermen from Galilee, but it's also mentioned in the Old Testament. It's done for thousands of years. For example, Habakkuk gives a very visual image of fishing in his reply to God that he makes here. He says, you've made mankind like the fish of the sea, like crawling things that have no ruler. He brings them all up with a hook. There's one way to catch fish. He drags them out of the net, out with his net. That's another way. And he gathers them in his dragnet, which I think is a different kind of net. It's a different Hebrew word, and he rejoices and glad. So there you found three ways just in this these one or two verses in Habakkuk. And in the New Testament, of course, is the famous example of passing alongside the Sea of Galilee. Jesus saw Simon and Andrew casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Okay, I'll just show a few examples of fishing. The first one here is very interesting. This again from the Old Testament. This is a relief from a palace from the Assyrians, and it shows an Assyrian fisherman catching fish with a hook. This is from about 700 BC. And here is another very fascinating picture of a fisherman with a net that was casting from a reed boat. And this actually is from Cairo, Egypt, where they have a living museum called the Pharaonic Village. Nobody's ever heard of it, and yet a lot of tourists go to Egypt. I think it's one of the most, it's like a living museum that shows you how life was in ancient Egypt, especially during the time of what we'd say is the time of the Old Testament or the New Kingdom in Egypt. Okay, and there he is dragging his net from a reed boat, both of which we see in Egyptian pictures that are left that survive today. In fact, here's an example. Here's a colored photograph of an Egyptian reed boat, just like the one you saw in the picture. And then here, it's not quite as nice of a picture, but if you look carefully, here they are on the reed boat casting a net to catch fish. They're fishing from a reed boat. So fishing has been around for thousands of years. It's not something relatively new. Okay, one more activity we'd like to look at that the Photo Museum talks about is music. Music and musical instruments are mentioned many times in the Bible, especially for worship in the temple, and especially the book of Psalms is probably the most well-known example where not only are these the Psalms meant to be sung, but they even mention musical instruments in some of the Psalms. Now, in antiquity, the three main methods of making music in the Bible and also in antiquity was plucking a string like a harp, or percussion like a drum, or blowing like in a windpipe. And we can see examples of all of these. But again, these are mentioned very early in the Bible, even in Genesis 4:21, where it talks about his brother's name was Jubal, but then it says Jubal was the father of all of those who play the lyre and the pipe. And there you have two examples. The lyre was a stringed instrument, I believe, and the pipe was a blowing musical instrument. And then also in Psalm 150, it says, praise him with trumpet sound, praise him with harp and lyre. There's three musical instruments named just in this one short verse in Psalm 150. So let's look at some examples. Here's a very early example of an ancient harp from Babylon that I believe is at least 700 BC, maybe even earlier. But this shows a musician playing an ancient harp. And here's a more stylized picture, but I have to show it because King David was renowned for playing a harp. And this is a 9th century church mosaic, which means it's sort of stylized, but it still shows us there's David written in Hebrew with him playing the ark here. So with the harp, rather, not the playing the harp. And here's some examples of actual Egyptian oboes and double flutes, where they would play two flutes, having both of them in the mouth, and you see pictures of mosaics of musicians playing flutes. And here I have to show this picture. This is actually at the floor of a synagogue with a mosaic floor, and this is the menorah, the 7-branch candle stand. But the thing I want to call attention to is one of the symbols of Judaism is the shofar, or the ram's horn, and you see it here on the right. And this shows the ram's horn with the lampstand and also with the branch, the palm branch here. And there you see written, if you can read it, Shalom al Yisrael, written in Hebrew, peace be upon Israel. And so this shows a blowing instrument. These are both examples. So music is mentioned quite a bit in the Bible. One more thing we have to do is writing, that illuminate. What about illuminating the activity of writing? Writing was very, very important, because without writing, we would not have a Bible, or at least not a written Bible. And many types of media were used for writing. They talk about, they use soft clay, they use stone, they used wood, they used pottery, papyrus. These were all things that were used to write down texts in antiquity. They didn't have paper. Papyrus would be the closest to paper, but they didn't have what we call today modern paper. And here's some examples in the Bible that talk about writing. In Exodus 32:15, talks about the 10 Commandments. It says, the tablets which were written on both sides, they were written on one side and the other. So there's specific reference to writing. And another very interesting reference, a small book not many of us read very often, 3 John 13 at the end says, I have many things to write to you, but I'm not willing to write them with you with pen and ink. And so there are you telling you how he's going to write with pen and ink. Okay. And so there's an example, and probably on a piece of papyrus, very likely, even though he doesn't mention it here. Okay, so now let's look at pictures that illustrate writing. Well, that's the first interesting one. This is a picture of an Egyptian scribe. You can see him sitting down there holding a scroll in his hands, and this is how there's many pictures of scribes that would write down things. They were educated people that would support the Egyptian life and write down things for the record. And here's an example of what they might have written. This is an Egyptian papyrus written in a script form of hieroglyphics, and it survived in Egypt because everything is dry in Egypt. And this is an actual piece probably dating to sometime in the New Kingdom, which would be 1,000 years BC or earlier. Okay, now this is a very, very interesting example of writing. This is the Gezer calendar. This is one of, I got to say one of, because there's some other more recent findings. This is one of the earliest examples of writing of Hebrew. Now you might say, I don't see Hebrew, but this is real Hebrew. Hebrew you see today is really Aramaic letters. And here is example of a calendar written probably during the time of the judges, showing the different, using what they call Paleo-Hebrew script here, with the different letters, and it was probably served as a calendar. And then this is also an example of writing from the Old Testament. And here you see, instead of inscribing the letters on a stone, they wrote on ink on a piece of pottery. We call it ostraca. And this, the reason this one is so interesting is that it was found at Arad, one of the sites in Israel, but it actually mentions the house of God. And that's exactly the expression used in the Old Testament when they're referring to the temple. In other words, this inscription we found in archaeology actually refers to the temple, which was existed at that time. It wasn't destroyed yet. And then from the New Testament, we have this very fascinating example of a Greek temple inscription warning. This is written in Greek, but it was from the temple, and it was written in Greek to say that it is forbidden for any Gentile to enter into the Jewish part of the temple. That would be the court of women today if you've studied the temple, and under pain of death, that you would be put to death if you tried to enter inside of this Jewish area. And this is one of the Greek inscriptions. We also have another couple of fragmentary examples of this. And then the last inscription I have to show you because it's so famous. This is the famous Pilate inscription. This was found at Caesarea, and this is the only possible, well, there's maybe one more I heard recently, but this is one of the only main references to Pontius Pilate. And you see him written in Latin letters, Pilatus on the second line, and on the first line you see Emperor Tiberius, or Tiberium, it's written in Latin. And if you, the other lines are hard to read, but I believe they mentioned Judea. But this is the only extra biblical evidence of Pontius Pilate, the governor who sent Jesus to be crucified. So now we've looked at examples of activities from the photo museum. Let's now look at examples of people groups from the Bible that the photo museum illustrates. First one we're going to take is the Philistines. Those are pretty well known. They're sort of notorious because of the famous story of David and Goliath. But the Philistines, as I mentioned earlier, were a group of people who migrated across the sea. Now, I've heard a few scholars say they went overland, but I don't want to get into that. From the area of Crete and the Greek islands. They were invaders. In fact, the word Philistine in Hebrew means invaders. They were called, now they didn't call themselves that, but that's what they were called in the Bible. And they were very prominent in the early history of Israel, especially during the period of Judges, Samuel, and David, although they are mentioned in the book of Genesis and in other places, but these are the main books where they're mentioned. And just a couple of examples here in Judges 13:1, the sons of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines. So there we go. The Philistines were the oppressors of Israel in the book of Judges. And in 1 Samuel 17:4, you have the very famous Goliath. A champion came out from the armies of the Philistines named Goliath, and they even say what city he was from Gat, which today is being excavated heavily, whose height was 6 cubits in a span. And I don't want to get in, there's some textual issues with that, but I don't want to get into that now. So how can we illustrate the Philistines? Well, one very interesting illustration is in Egypt. These Philistines in Egypt were called sea peoples. They invaded from the sea. This is why all of the towns, the 5 cities of the Philistines mentioned in the Bible, were all near the southwestern coast of Israel because they invaded from the sea. But what's fascinating here is that the king here, I believe it was Thutmose III, fought a battle with these Philistines in Egypt and took prisoners. And this is how the prisoners looked. And this is probably one of the best pictures we have of how did the Philistine soldiers look. And they wore this very distinctive helmet that had feathers on the top of it. And so we show that. That's an illustration of how did these actual Philistine soldiers look. Well, there it is. And then another interesting thing is the Philistines don't have too many inscriptions, but there are some inscriptions. And here is a Philistine inscription from Ekron. But if you look carefully, you see that they've already adopted the Paleo-Hebrew letters, even though I don't believe that the language was Hebrew. Maybe it was by this time, but they were using already the out because they tended to assimilate into the culture after they invaded. And another very interesting thing is here is an iron knife from Ashdod that was excavated from the Philistines. And Judges 1:19 brings out the fact that the Philistines were ahead of the Israelites technologically. They knew how to make iron and to work iron, and the Israelites did not know how to do that. So they had somewhat of a technological advantage. And here's an illustration of that. And here's another one that I'll show that we saw earlier, the cult stand with the musicians from Ashdod. Well, again, this was part of the Philistine religious cult. And so this is again a picture that illustrates the life and beliefs of the Philistines. Now let's go to another people group, the Romans from the New Testament. Now we talked about the Old Testament. The Romans were a people from Italy who eventually ruled much of the ancient world during the time of the New Testament. Or if you want to get really technical, ancient Western world. I don't want to get into that, China and so on. China did exist. In fact, the Romans actually imported silk from China. But anyway, I'm talking about the Western ancient world. The Romans were best known in connection with the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, but they were also very instrumental in the spread of early Christianity because you had the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, you had the Roman roads, and what that did was encourage the spread of early Christianity. It was easy to go from one area to another because of the Roman Empire and the Roman road system. Now, the Romans are mentioned specifically in the New Testament. In John 11:48, the priests say because they're threatened by Jesus, if we let him go, that is Jesus, unlike this, all men will believe in him. And then what? The Romans will come, take away our place in our nation. In other words, they were so afraid because the Romans already had control of Israel, but the high priests were afraid that what little authority they would have, the Romans would even take that away. And in Acts 22:7, a commander came to Paul and said to him, "Tell me, are you, Paul, a Roman?" And he said, "Yes." So there, Paul would use the fact that he was a Roman citizen. He was from Tarsus in Asia, and he used the fact that he was a Roman citizen. So let's look at some pictures. Well, here's another picture of a Roman soldier with a spear and a sword and a shield and so on. And many of these pictures are really fascinating. They come from what we call funerary stelas. They would markers that they would carve what the deceased person may have looked like. And from those, we get a lot of pictures of daily life from the time of the Bible. And then this is an interesting thing from a museum. This is a ballista siege engine where they've actually reconstructed it here in the museum for launching gigantic arrows. I think this would have fired arrows, not so much a catapult. That would have been a different machine. But anyway, the Romans were a very powerful people, but yet they also tolerated the Jewish religion, and they also had a magnificent road system and this peace so that people could go anywhere in the Roman Empire unhindered. And then another illustration of the Romans is we now have three-dimensional statues or busts of the emperors, and here's Emperor Nero, for example. And the one that I think is the most interesting of all is this one is actually in Rome, in Italy. This is in the Arch of Titus in the Roman Forum, which shows the menorah, the seven-branch candlestand, being taken by the Romans and presented and marched in Rome as a spoils of war. They took the temple, they got the menorah, brought it to Rome, and I'm not going to speculate where it is today. You can read a lot of stories about that. But anyway, this shows the menorah, the temple lampstand, being brought to Rome. And all of this was related to the Romans. Now, finally, the last part of the photo museum I wanted to show is rulers and prophets from the Bible. First of all, rulers. The rulers means various people groups included. We mean pharaohs, kings, emperors, and others. The rulers illustrated in the photo museum are also shown in the timeline. There's a close connection between the photo museum timeline. If you want to see the time of the ruler, you can go from the photo museum to the timeline. If you want to see a picture or illustration related to that ruler, you can go from the timeline to the photo museum. And we do know more about the rulers because they're the ones most likely to be recorded in history. And here's a couple of examples. 2 Chronicles 28:20 talks about king of Assyria, Tiglath-Pileser, came against the king there and afflicted him. And in Matthew, we read about the infamous ruler Herod the king, the one that killed the babies in Bethlehem that we talked about earlier. And when King Herod heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. So there's examples of rulers. So let's see what we've got. Well, we actually have pictures of many of the Assyrian rulers because they left these reliefs on their palaces, and we've excavated. That is actually an Assyrian king, Tiglath-Pileser. It's actually mentioned in the Bible. We actually have a picture of how he looked. And here is a sarcophagus of Herod the Great that they found at the Herodian. Although a lot of it is reconstructed, the rough part is the sarcophagus and the smooth part is the reconstruction. But they finally found what they believe is to be the tomb of Herod the Great in the Herodian. Now, prophets we don't have much of, but I'll show a couple of things. The prophets proclaimed the will of God to the people, and they were also, I might add, people that proclaimed they stood a stand for ethics and morality among the people. They stood against the crowd when people were going away, but even ethically and morally away from God. And they're mainly mentioned in the Bible, not so much in archaeology, because like I said, the rulers are the ones that are remembered more than the prophets. We mainly know about the prophets from the Bible. But the prophets illustrated in the photo museum are also shown chronologically in the timeline. And I'll just give you a couple of examples of prophets. This is a pretty famous verse from Deuteronomy 18. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me, that is like Moses, from among you, from your brothers. It is to him you shall listen. And in 2 Kings, it talks about prophet Jonah, which we also have a book of. It at least says that this is the same Jonas, the son of Amittai. He restored the border of Israel according to the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, which he spoke by his servant Jonah. And it says specifically the prophet who is from Gath-hepher. So there's some prophets. There's lots more in the Bible. That one's a tough one to illustrate, but here's a few examples. Here's Elijah on Mount Carmel. If you go to the site that commemorates the confrontation of Elijah with the prophets of Baal, you see this more modern statue of Elijah confronting and stepping on the prophets of Baal whom he defeated, and I believe it says he also killed them after the confrontation. But this is to commemorate very near to the site where Elijah confronted the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. And why did he confront them? Because they were false prophets and they worshiped the idol Baal. And here's one example. I've got many more in the photo museum of the god Baal. And you see him holding a rod and a lightning because he was the god of the storm, the thunder and the lightning and so on. And basically it was a confrontation of who is the real God, Baal or the Lord God. Okay, now we've finished now giving you an overview of the photo museum. I now want to talk about the picture of the New Testament. This is going to be our last main resource that I want to talk about. And what this is a photo commentary of the New Testament. Again, I'm going to have to say, without sounding like I'm a salesman here, but there's really nothing like this. This is a photo commentary of the New Testament. There are one or two other commentaries that say they're visual, but these are much, the photo commentary of the New Testament here has many, many more pictures than any of these other illustrated commentaries. And most of the visual resources in accordance are presented in alphabetical order, which is what we showed you, like the photo museum, like the photo guide, or like a pictorial Bible dictionary. But what the photo commentary of the New Testament does is present these background pictures in verse order, like a pictorial commentary. And the idea here is that if a verse in the New Testament can be illustrated, then all pictures related to that verse are shown. So that's the idea. We want to illustrate as much as we can. And obviously a few verses you can't illustrate, but as much as we can illustrate, you can do it. And the idea here is it's in versification order. So let's look at an example here. Matthew 2:1. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem, Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem. Again, this is a very familiar verse you might hear read at Christmas time. And so what do we do with this resource? Well, first we have the heading, Matthew 2:1, which says these are the pictures related to that. And what we do is subdivide them into categories. Here's the category of Bethlehem. Here's a little map that tells us where Bethlehem is. Here's the pictures of how Bethlehem looks today. And then notice the hyperlinks. If you want to see more detail of these, you can click on the hyperlink and open up the photo guide and see even more details of this. But that's not all. That's just Bethlehem. Now we look at the next keyword, Judea. Here's an article on Judea. And it's a little introduction here with a map of Judea. And here's a map showing the hill country of Judah, which is Judea. Judea is the Greek word for Judah, or Yehudah in Hebrew, and southwest of Jerusalem. But wait, there's more. It also mentions King Herod. So now we have the third subcategory of Herod. And here's a short introduction to Herod along with hyperlinks to the verses which mention him. And then here's a picture. This is Herod's tomb, a reconstruction. It's not the original because it was destroyed. This is a reconstruction of Herod's tomb at the Herodium, near where they found the sarcophagus that I showed you earlier. And then yet there's more. It talks about the wise men. How do we illustrate the wise men from the east? Well, one way is to say that they were probably from the regions of Mesopotamia and Persia. And we've even got here tablets that talk about astrology. And the left one actually records the observation of Halley's Comet in 164 BC. Now, these are later tablets, but the point is they're from this area of Mesopotamia where they wrote quite a bit on the stars. They observed the stars in quite a bit of detail. Another illustration of the wise men comes from a very ancient church from the 4th or 5th century. It's in Istanbul, Turkey, Kora Church, and this shows a very early mosaic of the wise men coming to bring the gifts to Jesus. And then there's one more. We also have mentioned, just in this one verse, we're still in one verse, of Jerusalem. And here we give a short introduction to Jerusalem, show two pictures. Here's a modern picture from the air showing the old city of Jerusalem. And this is a picture of the model of Jerusalem in the Israel Museum, which is very worthwhile visiting if you're there. And this shows two pictures of Jerusalem and describes what we're looking at here. But then, of course, we have hundreds of pictures of Jerusalem in the photo guide in Israel here. So all of that was just one verse in Matthew. And this is what I mean by illustrating in verse order for the for the photo commentary. Now let's do another verse, which I think is a little more interesting because it's abstract. In Acts 2:20, and this I believe is the sermon of Peter, it says, the sun shall be turned into darkness, the moon to blood before the day of the Lord comes, the great magnificent day. Well, this is actually a quotation, I believe, from Prophet Joel, but how can we illustrate this? Well, let's look at this. It says the sun shall be turned to darkness. Here's a total eclipse of the sun where the moon blocks the light from the sun. And if you expand this, you see how the sun, one way the sun can be turned to darkness. Now, I'm not saying there is a total eclipse in Acts 2:20, but I am saying that this illustrates what do we mean by turning the sun to darkness. It could also mean like there's a cloud during the day that was very heavy and blocked out the sunlight. But the point is, this is a nice illustration of the sun being turned to darkness. You can even see the solar prominences on the edge when you zoom into that picture. And then it talks about the moon to blood. Well, there's an illustration of the red moon. This is what you see during a lunar eclipse, when the earth blocks the light going to the moon, but you see the red because in the atmosphere, the red wavelengths get through the atmosphere and the blue is blocked. And I think they're also somewhat refracted, so that now the light that goes around the earth in the atmosphere is cast on the moon, and it's now looks red. So this really illustrates a little bit about what he might be talking about there. So that's an example of how you illustrate something a little more abstract. And then finally, I have to do a epistle in the New Testament. How do we illustrate Ephesians 1:1? Well, first we have Paul. And here's again a very early picture of the Apostle Paul, again from the Cora Church in Istanbul. And then we talk about Ephesus. He says, to the saints who are in Ephesus. So let's look at Ephesus. Again, we have a map showing where Ephesus is. We show some of the more major sites in Ephesus. And of course, we'll have a hyperlink if you want to see more pictures about Ephesus. And then we also have cross references here in the introduction, both over on this left side and on the right side. Okay, we're done now showing pictures, and we're going to have a time for questions now. But I wanted to talk about this as a question always comes up when we talk about photographs, is how can I use these photographs in accordance? And that's what I want to conclude with, and then we'll take questions afterwards. Okay, first of all, within accordance, of course, use them. The whole purpose of the photographs is to help you. For example, you can use the photographs for any Bible background of any subject just about. And you can also, within accordance, there's hyperlinks. You can go to and from these visual resources just by clicking on hyperlinks, or using what we call the amplify feature in accordance, where you can select a word and then go look at any other resource. And then I'm showing it here, but I'm going to show it to you live in just a second. Is the other thing you can do within accordance is parallel scrolling. This is why we have pictures of the New Testament, because it's like a reference to it or a commentary. I can now show that verse in Ephesians 1 and read the text, and then see on the right the illustration of that text. And as I scroll through, they will stay synced with each other. If I scroll to Ephesians 1:2 and 1:3, the photo commentary will also scroll with me, so that I've always got the pictures right by the verse that I'm looking at the top here, that is illustrated. Okay, now what most people mean, everybody says, sure, I can use the pictures in accordance. What most people mean is exporting pictures from accordance. That's where things get a little bit trickier, but it's not really that bad. First of all, we encourage you to export pictures from accordance. You can do this as long as it's for certain uses. And there's several ways to export from accordance. You can copy and paste the picture. If you have the picture and it's the front window or front pane, you can copy and paste. You can even take thumbnails that you see in any resource and drag and drop them to another external, like to a word processor, to a graphics program, or to Keynote or PowerPoint. You can also just simply take the front picture and save it as a picture file. It'll be saved probably as JPEG. And you can even take the picture and print it as a PDF document. So there's a lot of ways to export pictures from accordance. But here's the trick, is what's okay and what isn't okay. And I'll just go ahead and review this. just for your own information. This is where we're going to conclude. First of all, we of course encourage personal study. That's why you have the pictures there. We also very much encourage using the pictures for educational, academic, or church use, or Sunday school, or even whatever you want to use them for, because that's what we encourage you. That's the point of the photographs. Certainly there's no problem using them for educational, academic, teaching, whatever. And as far as we're concerned, you can even make handouts in a class with these pictures that'll help you teaching. But here's what we'd rather you not do. Okay, there are a few things we'd like to limit, and a lot of this is just common sense, really, because these photographs are copyrighted and pretty much follows the copyright law. That for copyright law says that you can use, forgot the legal term, excerpts, that without any problem. You can use short excerpts of copyrighted for this kind of use. So what is not okay? The big one is posting on the internet. This is the thing we'd rather you not do, is post it on the internet, because once it's out in the internet, you can never get it back. Okay. And the second thing is, what's not okay is if you want to use the pictures on a website or a book or an article that's going to be distributed publicly, we prefer you to get permission or attribution. And it's easy to get. We've had some people ask us, can I use this article for this? And we said, sure. And just give the attribution that it's from Accordance. We didn't even ask for a royalty or anything from it, but at least it attributes where you got it. And this is all because of copyright. And I might mention also, I didn't write it down here, that the vast majority, I would say 90 to 95% of the pictures are copyrighted in Accordance, but we have licensed some pictures from other photographers. And for those pictures, we do note them with the annotation, with the caption on the picture, that they are copyrighted by other photographers, and you really need to get permission from them if you want to use their picture. So mainly we put this because we're trying to follow copyright law. Okay, so this is all the presentation, but now what I'd like to do here is to show you, just take a few minutes and then we'll do questions. I'm showing you in Accordance itself how a couple of these tools that I mentioned here. First of all, let's look at the Photo Museum, and here's another people group that I did not talk about called the Edomites. These were Semitic people that live south and east of the Dead Sea. And you see here, we give a very overview and introduction of this people group, along with hyperlinkable verse references. If you click on the verse, you'll then come up here with the verse, or if you just simply open up the instant details on the bottom here, as I'm showing here, then you can just put the cursor and it'll tell you what the verse is in any translation that you prefer. So that's the first thing. We introduce the people group, give them a summary, and then we show objects that illustrate that people group. This is an Edomite cult stand that was uncovered in the Negev, and this is in a museum now, and you can even zoom in and see what that looks like. This is a warrior cult stand. It was from the Edomites. And then we talk, that was an introduction. Then we talk about, and by the way, I'm showing one of the shorter articles. We actually have a lot longer articles on people groups. Here's the Edomite religion. Little is known, but what they have uncovered is this shrine. Here's an example of a picture that is licensed from the Israel Antiquities Authority, used by permission, and you'd need to go to them to get a copy of it. And this is a reconstructed cult stand in the Israel Museum that was from an Edomite site, which shows a little bit about the Edomite religion and so on at that time. And the Edomites are definitely mentioned in the Bible, but they did, as far as we could tell archaeologically, they had their own local deities. Okay, so, okay, and then here's some other pictures of the objects on the cult stand. And this is supposed to be a Edomite goddess here. Okay, so that's the Edomites. I'm not going to show you the Egyptians, but that comes after because I have a lot more there. But this is an example, a small example of a people group in the Photo Museum. And you see on the left here, we have our table of contents where you can quickly find anything. We open up C, and now you see there, for example, is the article on the Canaanites. Or here's an article on chariots, but it says you need to see two different articles. If it's for combat, you go to the warfare. It's for chariot racing, it's in the article on games and sports. And the whole idea of this photo guide is to bring the Bible alive so that you can connect with real tangible objects of what you read about in the Bible. Okay, now I'd like to show the next tool. That's the Photo Museum. This just shows you how we use the Photo Museum. And one other thing I guess I ought to mention is the way you use tools. Most of you who've used accordance tools know that we have categories so that you can focus your search here. And I'm going to do the caption one because that'll tell me. And I'm going to look here for the picture Megiddo. Okay, now that's a site. I'm looking in the Photo Museum because we have an article on Megiddo in the photo guide. But now there are all the pictures that are from Megiddo. Here's the horned altar that we showed earlier. And let's see, how many more do we have here? I can't, let me move this here a little bit. Looks like we got 40 hits, so I'm not going to show them all. That's the same. Here is a seal of the King Jeroboam from Megiddo. And here's a Canaanite ruler. This is a very interesting thing in the Photo Museum. This actually is in a very clear drawing of they're bringing prisoners, and here he's playing the harp and so on. And here you see something that a object that looks very much like the cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant. This is an ivory piece that was inscribed with it's actually quite rare to see the Canaanites do this kind of artwork. There's a few other examples, but it's not common. So anyway, that's the Photo Museum. I just did a search, and of course there's many others. We can go to there's the statue of El from Megiddo, one of the gods like Baal. I'm not going to go into all the details of the mythology. And there's Rashef, which was a prototype to Baal, and so on. Anyway, you get the idea. Let's go to the next resource. This is the resource of the virtual Bible. And it does show a map here showing you this is a reconstructed based on archaeology, fairly accurate of Jerusalem from the time of the New Testament. And here's another picture looking on edge. But the thing that's most interesting is we also have videos. If you see a video camera, you can open this up, and now it's going to take a narrated. You probably can't hear it. I can hear it on my earphones. But now you see here's the Pool of Siloam, and now we're going to go up the old city of David, up to the temple here. There's Robinson's Arch. And both of these you can see today. That's Wilson's Arch. We're at the Western Wall that you see today. Anyway, you get the idea. We don't have to watch the whole thing, but I just wanted to give you an idea of just this is the kind of thing that it has on that resource. Okay, now the last thing I want to show you is this says ESV was Strong's. Well, this is the ESV was Strong's, but what I really want to show you is how the picture of the New Testament, the photo commentary works. Now, this is the beginning of Mark, and you see here the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, Son of God. Well, we can't illustrate gospel too much. Maybe we'll find something, and we are planning to expand this, or thinking about it. And Jesus Christ is mentioned everywhere, so we're not putting those images. But here it's the Son of God. Well, right here is an inscription in Greek that was written only a few decades after the Gospel of Mark was written that talk exactly of that expression. Huiu theu. You see it over here in the left. And if I go to the next picture, we zoom it, there it is. Huiu theu, written the Son of God, written in capital letters in Greek. This, of course, didn't apply to Jesus. It applied to Emperor Hadrian. This was from Jerash in Jordan, but it illustrates that exact phrase, Son of God, was adopted in Greek that the emperors used, that the gospel writers applied to Jesus Christ. And so now, as we scroll through, this is how it works. Now, interesting, we don't have any illustration for Mark 1:2. We might need to find one for Isaiah, but we didn't find one. And now it says the voice of one crying in the wilderness. And so now in Mark 1:3, let's illustrate the wilderness. And so now here's an article introducing the wilderness, and there is the wilderness, very, very dry, desolate area east of Jerusalem. And here's the Wadi Kel. We showed this earlier near where the monastery was, and it really is a very dry, desolate area. And then prepare the way of the Lord, makes his way straight. And here we see a highway in the wilderness. You could see this is I believe this is in Jordan, but you see here the road on this deep gorge. I think it's Arnon Valley in Jordan and mentioned in the Bible. And you see the way, how they put the road up here to illustrate making the way straight in the wilderness. And then you can just keep going. Now you have John. This is John the Baptist. Well, here's a very early, probably 4th or 5th century mosaic illustrating John the Baptist on the Jordan River, talking to the people on the left are from Jerusalem, the people on the right are Jesus and his disciples. I think that's what it looks like. And then here's a church in Medeba, Jordan, that commemorates John the Baptist, and there's his beheaded head, a replica of the head, because he was beheaded by King Herod. And then here's wilderness again. Now, some people have criticized this for repeating. You know, they say, oh, you're showing the same pictures a lot of times. The reason we do that is so that it will sync, so that if I go back here to wilderness in Mark 3, and then I go to Mark 4, I'll have the wilderness there right before me. I don't have to go back to Mark 3 or 1:3 to find it. And so this was the method why we chose. We could have just put pointers, but if we did pointers, then you would lose the verse on the left that you're trying to study. And so that's why we repeat the pictures a lot, even though some people have commented that their pictures are repeated too much. But I can guarantee you there's a few thousand pictures in this picture of the New Testament. Okay, and so we could just keep going down, and you see how there's Judea, there's clothes with camel hair, and there's sandals. There's some ancient sandals from the caves of Judea where he talks about the strap of whose sandals I'm not. So you get the idea. We even tried to illustrate Holy Spirit here. This is an early inscription from Rome where it actually mentions the Holy Spirit, and this is an inscription of a gravestone from Rome, from very early believers, okay, in Rome. So anyway, that gives you the general idea of how we use the picture of the New Testament and how you can use it to tie together the Bible. I'm going to stop now. My time is up, and I want to leave time now for questions. So what I'm going to do is turn on the video again, and we'll leave Accordance open. Whoop, I have it on all the time. Maybe I had it on all the time. Okay, so let me bring this up front so I see myself a little bit here. Where are we? Just to give you a second here. Let's bring up, where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay, I think the video's off now. Okay, oh, it was off. Now we'll turn it on. There we go. Okay, I'll leave my video on, but I may go to Accordance or to the presentation. And Richard, are you there?
I'm here, Roy, and I have some of the questions here written down.
Okay, well then, Mark, go ahead and ask some of the questions.
Yeah, we had some questions about if you use some of these images in handouts, for example, to hand out at church, but you also put the handout on a church website for people to download. Is that okay to do that?
Boy, you know, we're not the police. We're asking you to use your conscience. We're not going to report you to the police if you do something. If, you know, on a website, in theory, it could get out anywhere. I'll have to let you make the best judgment for that. And that's not really a question about the resources. That's a question about the use of resources. Other people in Accordance, other staff could probably help you with that. The main thing is be reasonable about it. In other words, it is copyrighted material, but on the same time, the church can't police the website if somebody takes a copy of it. I would just say use common sense, recognizing that this is copyrighted material, and follow the law on copyright. That would be my answer.
Thanks, Roy. Another question. Are there any visual resources in Accordance that cover animals, either real and or mythological?
We actually have an article on animals in the photo museum. There's a whole article, and we have, in fact, maybe since you mentioned it, let's find it and I'll just show you. And we also have other resources, but we don't have any that focus just on animals. But here, let's just go ahead. Here you go, animals. Okay, first we talk about camels, and here's a very early Assyrian release of camels. And then we go on, that's a lot of camels. There's cattle, and we have especially bulls, because they tended to worship bulls. A lot of them there. I'm just showing that here's a bull figurine from a high place in Samaria. Okay, and This is a very interesting carved ivory of a cow with a calf. Very nice little carved ivory. Then we have dogs. Well, here's a dog on a Canaanite relief fighting a lion. And here's hunting dogs that the Assyrians used when they were out hunting. So what I guess my point is, you don't have to see all the animals. We'll stop with dogs. There's lions, lots of lion pictures. Lots of lion pictures. In fact, I haven't gotten down to the good ones. Yeah, the Assyrian lion hunt like this is these are just tremendous pictures. You're showing the capturing lions. So the answer is yes and no. We do not have a resource that's dedicated to animals, but the Photo Museum does show quite a few portraits of how animals were portrayed in antiquity. That would be the answer I would give. And some of the other resources might also have pictures of animals also in them.
Yeah, just Mark, I'm going to just interrupt here just real quick. Not that it's part of this presentation, but as a side note to all the people that are out there listening and watching this workshop, Roy has also worked on a very extensive database called the Anderson-Forbes database. And Roy, is it true that in that database you can search for a genre? So you could search for all the animals. You don't have to say
Absolutely.
that it's a dog or a camel or whatever. You can just say,
but there's one little catch.
All the animals.
But you didn't tell them one big catch is it is a Hebrew search. But even if you don't know Hebrew well, you can say search for all of the nouns, because what they did in Anderson-Forbes is what they call semantically tag the kind of object, like is it human, is it animals, is it deity, is it a river, is it a mountain, and so forth. And you can say, I want to look for all the animals, and you can do that in English because the interface is in English. And then what you can do is put an English translation of the Bible. In fact, Richard, since you're mentioning it, I've got a concordance, why don't I do it? Okay, so let's open up.
I just think that it's a phenomenal database. And
okay, here's the Anderson-Forbes. There it is in Hebrew. I warned you it was in Hebrew, but so I've got this control panel in front of me. I'm going to put oh boy, just a second. I have to move this control panel. Okay, I'm going to put the ESV in parallel there. So there you are in ESV. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to search under search by tag. I'm going to do a noun. We know it's a noun. And so I'm going to go to semantics. And now I'm going to say, boy, where is it? Oh, a creature. I think that's what it is, not animal. Let's do creature. Okay. I'll say okay. So that says do a noun that's a creature. And now we do it. And there it is. But sheretz is a more general word, living creatures. And chayat, off, you see the birds and so on. And by the way, in accordance, if you don't know Hebrew well, you just put the cursor and it'll cross highlight the equivalent word in English if you're not sure what it is. So there's Taninim, the great sea creatures, and there's Romeset. They did tag, now I wouldn't have tagged that noun, but who am I to tell them? They did tag it as a noun. It's actually a participle. But anyway, Romeset, the creeping creatures, and there's Off, that's the bird. So you see, I found all the creatures here. They didn't use the word animal, they used creatures in Hebrew, but now I can look at all the verses. Look, there's 3,200 verses that have any kind of animal in them in the Bible. And in fact, since we're talking about accordance, let me go ahead and just show off the analysis, which many of you are familiar with. And there it gives you an alphabetical listing of all of the words that it found. And I'm surprised that, most of them are animals, but I don't know why they put some of these are verbs, but most of these are animals. So you get a list of all the animals and with the annotation here on the right. Okay. Anyway, Richard, I guess I gave you a bigger answer than you really wanted. Okay. So
yeah.
Does that answer your question about searching for animals?
Yeah. I just thought that was interesting, that database. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
That was great.
Mark, do you have another question?
Absolutely, got a few here. Going along with the question that you just answered about animals in the Bible, does the Photo Museum have a section on food in the Bible?
I believe so, yes. And by the way, I want to give credit. I don't know if David Lang is actually listening to this. We have 128 attendees according to my GoToWebinar here. I don't know if David, but I have to give credit. David was the one that wrote and put together this museum based upon the pictures that were furnished to him. So I want to give him credit. So let's see if we can find it here. Let's go under food. I thought there was an article on food. Maybe let me just look under entry and see if I can find food maybe combined with something else. No, I thought there was something on food. Let me look in the captions for food. Okay, no, that's the house. How many do we have here? Let's see here. We only have 6. Maybe we don't have food. I thought we did. Here's about offerings that are food. I mean, you can see illustrated here in Egypt how the pharaohs would bring food here in these reliefs to the to the rulers here. But actually on what I thought we had something, but I guess not on food. No. Nope, that's it. Sorry, I guess we don't have anything on food to answer at the current. David's listing, here's another idea he can have. I thought we had something on food, but maybe I'm mixed up with another resource that we have.
Well, and I was doing some searches in the captions for words like bread and wine and grapes, and I was finding specific things like that. So.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Where would wine be under?
Well, I just searched in the captions for wine. So, but
Okay.
let's see, where was it?
W-I-N-E. Okay, well, that's offerings. There's not too many of those.
I think there was a food section in the Anderson Forbes that when you just showed it.
Yeah, there was an Anderson Forbes, but they were asking about pictures with it. Okay, what would this be under? Games and sports. No, but that's okay. We don't have a lot. Looks like we might have articles illustrating grapes and wine and so on, but not really an article on food. So I guess that's my answer to the question.
Yeah, great. Let's see. Question about whether you think the photo guide collection would replace a dictionary like the Zondervan Encyclopedia of the Bible.
Oh my goodness. No, it certainly would not. There are 2 different types of tools. The photo collection will have many more pictures. The photo guide and the photo museum has many more pictures than the Zondervan Encyclopedia does, but the Zondervan Encyclopedia has probably more detailed articles than we do. I mean, we give articles to introduce the things, like we'll give an article like Megiddo or Arad will give an article, a page or 2 introduction to it. But I believe the Zondervan Encyclopedia has many more articles, but I would say we have many more pictures, so they sort of complement each other, I would say.
Yes. Now, people are looking at your screen and seeing that you have the Bible Times Photo Museum 3. Does that indicate there's an update coming out? Because the version 2 is the only one available.
Already.
It's not.
It's not?
I think version 2 is, let's see what we have on the website.
I understood it was out. You'll have to ask David about that, and I don't know why it's not out, because I got this several months ago, and I just assumed it was out.
Well, guess there's a sneak peek then.
All right, you got a sneak peek, but I wonder why it's not out yet. You better talk to David and maybe Richard about that. I can't really answer that. I thought it was honestly out, but anyway, you got a sneak peek of some of the newer things that, like one of the new things I know he added. If we go here to, I think it's under Romans here. Let's go to Romans. One of the things that we did is at the end we have rulers, and so we have an article on rulers here. And what I meant to say is, if you go down to Roman rulers here, we have all the Caesars, at least up to a certain point, at least to the 2nd century. Julius Caesar, there's an article on him. A lot of stuff, Octavian or Augustus Caesar, a lot of articles on him. You even have coins. There's then Tiberius, and then you have Caligula. You don't have much on. He was a pretty bad emperor, as I recall. And then Claudius, some statues of Claudius and coins, Nero, he's pretty notorious. They have a lot of pictures. In fact, there's sub-articles like the Neronic persecution and so on. Here's a picture of Peter being crucified upside down by tradition anyway. It's done later, but it illustrates the persecution and so on at that time.
Roy and Mark, just to let you know, David finished up, of course, we have now a new enhanced timeline. And after he had gotten that done, he started working on adding those rulers and materials into the photo museum. And to let the people know, I don't know how far we are along the way on finishing that. David is not in our session right now. He is at another engagement. But I'm thinking, just like we did with the enhancement and like photo museums, if people already have the photo museum 2, it'll be a minimal upgrade charge to get 3. And so, but I don't think that 3 will be out much before late fall, honestly. So.
Okay, well, sorry, you got to get a sneak peek then.
And thank you. You have talked about this, but I think based on the questions I'm seeing, you might need to clarify a little bit about the difference between the photo guide and the photo museum.
Excellent question. The photo guide focuses on sites, like Megiddo, Arad, Jerusalem, and Rome, and Athens, and so on. The photo museum focuses on objects, as well as rulers and people groups, like I showed in the presentation. That's the big difference. They really don't overlap that much at all. I think only 1 or 2 articles overlap. I think we have an article, for example, on, I think the emperors are also in the photo guide in Rome. We have a extensive article on inscription and ancient writing, which talks about different kinds of writing here. And I think we have a similar article in the photo guide, but I'm not sure. And I think some of the rulers might overlap, but I would say at least 90% does not overlap. One focuses on sites, the other focuses on artifacts and objects. Does that answer the question?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you. Someone asked how many photos are in the photo commentary, and I looked it up for you. There's for the person that asked, there's 1,123 pictures in the photo commentary.
But that's different pictures. Some of them are shown more than once when they illustrate the same thing.
Right. And many, many more pictures than that, obviously, in the photo guide.
If you take all the photo guides together, I don't know, Mark, what we're talking about, several thousand.
Yes, and you might want to also talk a little bit, there were a couple of questions about the difference between the photo guide and the companion modules for the main photo guide, in the sense that someone was asking are there things in the companion volumes that aren't in the photo guide, and vice versa?
What do you mean by companion volumes?
Well, I mean the Near East photo guide and so forth, as opposed to
no, there's virtually no overlap between those different groups. Each one is divided by region, and there's very little overlap between the regions. The introduction, the photo guide introduction, will have all of the articles, but only many fewer photos. That's the difference. The introduction covers everything, but it only has only like 2 or 3 photos per article. The full photo guide will have at least 4 to 10 times more pictures than the photo guide introduction will. I don't know if that answers it. In other words, if you just want to read the article, the articles will be similar between the introductory photo guide and the set of 5 regional photo guides, but the set of 5 regional guides has way more pictures.